Hey, what's going on, guys? Battle Nation's Emperor here, back today with another video. And today, guys, we have a good one. We are going to be discussing every single boss strike leader to have ever led a boss strike in Battle Nations and theorized their backstory. So, of course, Battle Nations had these events called boss strikes. They were cool monthly events where you and your guild got together and fought a whole bunch of enemies, normally of a specific faction, and then you had the chance to win limited edition aircraft and a few resources in between. So today we're going to be cataloging each leader to have led that, because Battle Nation did something really interesting. Unlike most video games that try to, make their protagonist or, antagonist or some major character within their story leading their events, Battle Nations did something very specific. What they did is they had every single boss strike led by a unique leader. And when I say unique leader, I didn't mean like, they pulled, some, random side character and decided to give them a story. No, they literally made up a brand new character every single time to run a boss strike just to make them unique. So pretty interesting concept, but it's what they did and it's pretty cool. So we're going to go over each leader right now. And before we jump into today's video, I just want to thank you guys so much for 800 subscribers. It's absolutely freaking insane. We just hit 801 on the channel last I checked, and we are going fast. So I just want to thank you guys so much for the overwhelming support. Of course, we're doing a 50 subscriber milestone for every single subscriber all the way up to 1,000. So every 50 subscribers, we're going up to 1,000. We're going to do a special. And for 800, it is going to be our first ever stream. That's right, we're going to stream Battle Nations right here on Battle Nations Emperor YouTube channel and on Battle Nations on Twitch, just Battle Nations on Twitch, and it's going to be pretty freaking epic. So that's going to be either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, so either Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, and I'm so freaking excited about it. And again, just thank you guys for the constant support, making these videos better every single day, and love listening to you guys just talk about the game, talk about the community, and just watching Battle Nations come back. It's absolutely amazing. So with all that out of the way, let's jump right into today's list, starting off with number 1, the first ever boss strike and the first ever boss strike leader, Lieutenant Duran. What is there to say about this guy? So I'm going to throw this image up of him right now. This is how he was introduced to us. This was his promo. As you can see, he doesn't look that intimidating, but he still looks a little bit scary. I wouldn't want to mess with this guy. And, they introduced boss strikes. We were all like, yeah, cool. But they really did fumble his character because, while, this was his promo image, this is how he looked in promos, this is how he looked in the boss strike menu, when he released in Battle Nations, this is what they made him look like. And what a downgrade. Why did they make him go from a slightly intimidating leader to a depressed emo? I do not know. It has been debated to this day. We'll never really know. But yeah, I think Z2 just dropped the ball on this one, honestly. I wish they would just use a smaller version of this image, honestly. But no, instead we got the depressed emo right here. And yeah, as much as it sucks, it is what it is. I guess at the end of the day, it did add character to him. You remember him as the depressed emo, but not too terribly much else. He was leading the rebellions, first ever boss strike, and yeah. As far as his backstory goes, I like to think it's this. So Z2 themselves even said the boss strike was a massive success, more than they ever anticipated, and that, of course, they would be doing it more often, and obviously, became one of the biggest features of Battle Nations, right? However, I like to imagine Lieutenant Duran right here was an up-and-coming leader within the rebellion. He had a few wins under his belt, nothing crazy, but then he started to really get some success, if I can speak, some success, Started going out there, started winning battles, started dominating on every single front, started winning, and then the higher-ups in the rebellion said, you know what, you're really doing good, Duran, we're going to give you this option. So we're leading this thing called a boss strike against the Empire. We got to take him out, and we're putting you in charge. And I think Duran took full charge of that. I think he thought, oh, I could definitely kill, the Imperials and their army. And then just got swamped by us. Just got absolutely decimated. And his punishment for being decimated was a bullet to the back of the head. Yes, it's my theory that Duran was killed for his actions in the first boss strike. And my evidence for this is, one, he's never mentioned again. There are a few boss strike leaders who we'll get into in a moment who were repeated not just once, but multiple times, including a certain girl we'll get into momentarily. But yeah, they had no problem repeating boss strike leaders, but yet we never saw Lieutenant Duran ever again after the very first boss strike. If you were ever going to bring somebody back, you'd think you'd bring back the first leader, right? At least that's what I would think. But yeah, they didn't do that, decided for whatever reason to go against it, is what it is. And yeah, that's my theorized leader. I think he was up and coming. I think he had a lot of potential, but due to the massive failure of the boss strike, I think he was executed, simply because that's how guerrilla functions work, They're ruthless, they're tiresome. Rebellions are evil, really. I mean, Not in the sense that they're always evil, I guess theoretically there's a good rebellion, but we know the Battle Nations rebellion is not a good one at all. They're basically organized terrorists breaking away from the Empire. I consider them rebel scum, and yeah, I would not put it past them to execute one of their top lieutenants just for, a failure. Not at all. So yeah, that's my personal theory on Lieutenant Duran. Great introduction to the first boss strike, but wish we could have at least seen him back. Moving right along to the second boss strike leader, we have Shaman Kuros. And now, this guy's pretty interesting. And yes, this is a guy. I'm not going to lie. For the longest time, I thought this was a woman just from this image right here. But nope, it is a man. So this is Shaman Kuros. He leads the Raiders. He is a very well-renowned witch doctor within their community. And he led the first Raider Rebellion. Again, another massive success. Really well liked by the fans. And yeah, one interesting thing to note about this guy is he is one of the only boss strike leaders to have an in-game profile, and it looks like this. And I mean, seriously, look at this. This looks like somebody who, would come up to you and talk to you in a boss strike, or, not even a boss strike, just in-game, right? This pops up along with some text, and that's just, Battle Nations dialogue. So it's my personal theory, my Battle Nations theory, that he, for some reason, was intended to have longer dialogue. Maybe they understood that, Lieutenant Duran, for whatever reason, wasn't really incapable of running that type of event. And then, they throw up, this guy, Kuros, cool, and he runs it, and he does better, I imagine, because we do end up seeing him again. So yeah, he definitely wasn't killed after his first boss strike. But yeah, good boss strike, really, set the theme of what a boss strike would be. But I do think it's kind of sad that they, ended up cutting out his theoretical, dialogue, because this was never used. We found this in the game coding, but we would never see his profile officially, in game like he was talking to us, unfortunately. So that's that. That's what we officially know. So what's his backstory? It's my belief that Shaman Kuros was a well-renowned witch doctor within the Raider community. I believe he performed various different miracles, gained status off this, and turned himself into a somewhat prophet, maybe more accurately a cult leader. He picked up a good few Raiders who followed him, believed him over, the other warlords like Gannis and Saren, and he was able to build his own cult of personality, and after getting it strong enough, he decided to try to strike the Empire in a boss strike. That's my personal theory. I think after he failed, he was able to sell it to his men as, we lost because we didn't have enough faith, or, we lost because the enemy is powered by the devil, something like that, aka able to deflect blame off himself, unlike Lieutenant Duran, who caught a bullet to the back of the head. So that's my theory, just a very prominent witch doctor who was able to get a cult-like following and turn himself into somewhat of a prophet for his men. And yeah, would love to see him back as well. Very crazy voodoo type style going on with this guy. And yeah, love you, dude. Would love to see you back. And moving right along to, oh gosh, probably one of, if not the most popular boss strike leader in the entire game. And that, of course, is boss strike leader Enforcer Shrow. Man, if you don't love this girl, don't worry. Z2 loved you enough for her, you, me, and everybody else in the world. There was a total of 21 boss strikes. You know how many she got? Not 2, not 3, 5. She got 5 boss strikes. So literally, if they had just ended off one boss strike earlier and made it 20, she would literally account for 25% of all boss strikes in the entire game. Literally a quarter of every single boss strike, which is so freaking insane, especially we got people like Duran and a few other leaders who were literally never repeated once. So they had several leaders that, they introduced one and done and then never brought back into the game. And then you got people like Shrow right here who, were brought back 4 separate times after her initial lead, which is just insane. So yeah, Z2 absolutely loved this girl. Along with the fans, you can find a lot of fan art of her still to this day, but if you go search on Google, I warn you, all of it isn't PG, so just keep that in mind when you're watching or looking for it. And yeah, what's my personal theory for this girl? Well, it's my personal game theory that she was a great leader among the enforcers. I think she picked up prominence in the Civil Wars, not just for being a very tactical leader, but also being a woman. I think she encouraged her men through that. I think she kind of had this Joan of Arc vibe to her, like this woman leading various different, men into battle, basically just, peasant men, because, well, the, Civil Wars aren't peasants, I'm saying, but, they are kind of just, random criminals and gangsters, Raiders are just nomadic people trying to defend their land from Imperials. The rebellion is literally just us having a civil war. It's people of our own faction just breaking away from us. And then the Civil Wars are just organized crime. They're gangsters, more or less. Think of them more like the mafia. And yeah, I think she had high prominence in that. I think she was able to rob a lot of people for a lot of money. Got good prominence off that. I like to imagine she was a grenadier general going off doing her own thing. And I like to imagine she did the best of any of them. I mean, she was brought back 4 times, so at 4 different occasions they said, all right, Shrow, we know your last boss strike didn't go too well. You didn't kill the Imperials, but we're going to give you another shot. And she was able to have that said to her 4 separate occasions. So I think that's pretty cool. Good for her. And yeah, that's my personal game theory on her. I think she's a great leader. I would definitely like to see her back. And she almost definitely will. Unless, Madrona Games feels the exact opposite on her as Z2 did. While Z2 loved her, imagine Madrona Games just despises her, right? I hope it's nothing like that. I don't think it is. I think we will imagine seeing her back at some point. And yeah, would love to see her back. Great character. Love Shrow. And moving right along to the next boss strike, we have the Infected. This is personally my favorite boss strike. Not really too much to theorize about here. Very simply, this was the first October Halloween special. They decided to do an event for Halloween. And what better than zombies? Absolutely love the concept. Floyd doesn't like calling them zombies. He will insist they're anything but zombies. But we all know the truth. They're freaking zombies. No two ways around it. As far as my backstory behind them, this is kind of hard because it's not a definitive leader behind them, unlike all the others. But I guess if I had to make a theory for the infection, I'm going to go with it was made in a lab as biological warfare for a new unit. It broke out of the lab at Installation 17. Yes, I'm putting all the blame on the Installation 17 here because they feel like the ones who would do this. The virus broke out and infected a small camp of raiders, and then over the course of the next several weeks, it would vastly and quickly spread across the entire continent until eventually, we'd have a full zombie outbreak as we do in the October event. So that is my theory on the Infected. Just a virus that got out of containment in a lab and then just proceeded to turn all the populace into zombies. Pretty self-explanatory, but that's my personal game theory on it. And yeah, I would adore if we saw these guys again this October or next October. I need this boss strike back in my life. So yeah, this is legitimately my favorite boss strike. I beg we see this back. And yeah, hopefully we will some October in the future. Moving right along to our next boss strike leader, we have Evelyn Acehart. She is, of course, a direct play on Evelyn Acehart, the very famous American female pilot of a very similar name. However, she runs her boss strike very well. She, of course, as you can imagine, being a pilot, focuses more on aircraft. You pretty much see all aircraft that's been in the game at this point in her boss strike. She tries to fight you on the air as well as on land. And nothing too really to note about her. She is a rebel, so she's the same as Lieutenant Duran. This is the first boss strike we've seen since Lieutenant Duran for the rebels. So, they shoot Lieutenant Duran in the back of the head. They give Evelyn Acehart a chance. And yeah, she goes out there. She does her best. I imagine she was basically, like her namesake, a very experienced, very well-trained pilot. She maybe even impressed people even more because maybe, the rebellion didn't expect a woman to be that competent, and yet she went out there and, became one of the best of the rebellion. So she was given this shot to, go out there and try to take down the rebellion, kill them, and instead of, leading the rebellion to victory, killing all us Imperials and taking us down, she fails again, completely messes up, and catches another bullet to the back of the head. Because that's right, Evelyn Acehart was never brought back for another boss strike, which I'm not going to lie, kind of threw me off because you do see her one more time in Evelyn Acehart's Revenge at boss strike 11, but unlike the first one, which, introduced her and gave her, some new character, she never got any new content. So what I mean by that is Shrow, at least when she was brought back for the first time, and like most others, she got new concept art. This was the original promo art for Shrow, and this is the second promo art for Shrow. But when they brought Evelyn Acehart back, they just used this exact same image, the first one they had used for the first boss strike. So I just think it's kind of funny that they did that, didn't even give her the chance to, really get a new outfit. They did bring her back one more time for boss strike 11. But it would just be the exact same concept art. It would be called her Revenge, but we would never really see her. So yeah, it's my theory that they shot her in the back of the head, just like Duran, but instead they knew that there was a lot of controversy behind the assassination of Duran, even though they tried to cover it up. So they tried to put up this phony, oh, well, she's actually still here, but you can't see her type deal. And yeah, that's my personal theory. A great pilot who failed her first boss strike was killed for it, but unlike Duran, she wasn't completely swept under the rug. They tried propping her up one more time. It just didn't work. And yeah, that's my theory on Evelyn Acehart. And continuing right along, we have Yoltza, the raptor trainer. I freaking love this guy. So this guy brought a boss strike of 2 factions. He brought, of course, raiders and critters, being that, of course, he is a raider that, tames, critters like raptors and whatnot. Pretty self-explanatory. And yeah, absolutely love this guy. It's my theory that of all the animal trainers, he was the best. He had a way of talking to animals. He could just look into any animal, whether it be a mammoth, a raptor, or even a sandworm, and get them under his spell. I believe he built up a personality around this, being, the animal man. Literally, it's in his name, the animal trainer, or the raptor trainer, I'm sorry. But still, was able to talk to these critters, able to, domesticate the animals of battle nations. And I believe he was able to lead his men into rebellion under this concept of him being some great leader. Also, I believe this is more a case of Shaman. I don't believe he was assassinated or shot for his actions. He would come back multiple times in various different forms with new different types of boss strikes. So it's my belief that he was able to not only convince his men that, hey, I'm good, but was also able to, explain losses to them. So yeah, pretty cool guy. I like to imagine he's somewhat of an animal whisperer, has kind of that talent with them, and I still do very much believe he is alive today. And continuing right along, this one's actually pretty cool. We have Rebel Sergeant Lello. Now, this guy right here just looks like he would lead a rebel army. Like, just look at bro. He's smoking a cigarette. He's looking all nasty. He's looking all dangerous. Yeah, bro looks like yeah, seriously, he looks like what I would imagine. In my opinion, despite being one of the later on rebels, he full on looks like he fits the part. All in all, I love this dude. He was brought back for several different boss strikes, despite only being introduced in number 9. So very good on him for being able to come back multiple times. And my theory is he was a very strong, content leader like Lieutenant Duran. However, unlike Lieutenant Duran, who wasn't really as confident in himself and, really had this kind of emo phase that he tried to hide, nothing was about that with Lello. Lello was a ruthless, evil killer. All he cared about was power and murdering his enemies. I believe he was able to use this to basically turn it into anybody else's fault. Anytime he lost a strike, I think he was able to blame it on anybody below him, have them executed for their wronging, and I believe that's how he was able to come back multiple times. I think he's ruthless. I think he's evil. I think he's the version of Morgan for the rebellion, if you ask me. How we have Morgan, I think Lieutenant Lello is their version of Morgan, except even more ruthless, as ours is just, at the end of the day, maybe a little loud, maybe a little bit mean. He's just a nice little alcoholic. We all love him. Not this guy. He loves cigarettes, he loves killing people, and he loves making his enemies suffer. That's my personal game theory. I would hope we see this guy back, because we definitely deserve to. He's an absolutely goated dude. Would love to see him back for further boss strikes. And yeah, that's my theory on Lieutenant Lello. And finally, and yes, you heard that right, we're going into boss strike 10 and we're saying finally. But you might say, wait a second, isn't there 21 more boss strikes left? And you would be absolutely correct. However, they're all repeats or actually bring in stuff from the main game. So the only 2 leaders we'll meet after, new leaders we'll meet in boss strikes after boss strike 10 is the Sovereign Forces, basically the Sovereign Navy boss strike, and the Raider Warlord Challenge, which would be all of the Raider Warlords we know leading a boss strike. Which is pretty interesting, because, it shows that the concept of, taking a in-game leader, boss, and turning them into a boss strike unit wasn't lost on Z2. They understood the concept, they just didn't want to do it until later on for whatever reason. And that's kind of sad to me, because it seems they only did the Sovereign Forces just so, they could have a naval boss strike. And I think they did the Raider Warlord Challenge just so, they could bring in the Raiders. Which is sad, because I'm not going to lie, I'm thinking of it, and again, that was really the only 2. I'm looking at this list to make sure. That was really the only 2 times they brought in a unit or, a boss from the base game and made it into a boss strike unit. I wish they had done this more. I think it would have been cool if they had done this more. And yeah, so with all that being said, let's get into our last boss strike leader. In my opinion, one of the coolest. Boss strike 10, Dr. Vogle. Oh, what's there to say about this guy? He is a self-described mad scientist from the Silver Wolves, a complete maniac, works for their team, has a very special fascination with the ancient technology and the ancient civilization. And so much so that he was able to turn one of the fragments into a flying monstrosity that if you win his boss strike, you get, and it was one of the best trophies at the time. I absolutely love this guy as a limited edition unit. I hope we get him back as a limited edition unit. And yeah, with all that being said, my story for him, I think he has the most interesting one. I think he was a very low-tier researcher who was able to stumble upon some ancient technology, was able to get some slight praise for it and a slight promotion. but then just went completely mad into it. I think he used any bit of power and money he had to strip down the ancient ruins for everything they had. He would kill, steal, or buy any bit of ancient artifact or relic he can, and would just turn it into his personal possession. I believe this power led him well for the first little bit. I think he was able to find Dexter fragments, maybe even the ancient construction. Maybe he killed it just like we did and got his own fragment, but instead of just like we do, keep the fragment and make it part of our army, I think he probably took his Dexter or Sinister fragment and experimented on it heavily until eventually he was able to turn it into, of course, a flying Dexter fragment, which I think was his personal pet. I think this guy out of all of them has the most chance to have a in-depth lore built about them. That's nothing against, every single leader we've gone against before, because all of them, even though they really just have images, all of them look extremely cool, extremely well designed, and all of them look like they could have lore behind their character. But for whatever reason, Z2 just did not decide to do that. They didn't want to go down that route, which is perfectly fine for, whatever reason they decided, right? But of all of them, Dr. Vogle, just look at bro. He looks like he has a crazy backstory. I want to know it. My personal theory is just he went mad after discovering the ancients and then got obsessed with them. Just my personal game theory. Would love to hear yours. And yeah, that will just about do it for today's episode, guys. Really wanted to make this video. I was going to do one big video explaining boss strikes, which I definitely will do probably within the next week or so, and that'll be my last boss strike video for a while, unless you guys, want more boss strikes. But I just had to do this one quick video explaining each leader from Battle Nations, because even though we never got any character development on them from, Z2 side, it's sad because they gave us an original, unique, cool-looking leader each boss strike early on, and then just never gave them character, which is sad because all of them look so freaking cool, and I care about their stories. I genuinely want to know what happened with these guys. But yeah, just my little personal theory on what each one of them is, what each one of them does, as simple as I can, with somewhat basing it in reality of the small little bit we know about them and the one image we get of each of them. And yeah, guys, that will do it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider dropping a like down below and subscribing to the channel if you are new. What did you think of these boss strike leaders? Who was your favorite? Which do you want to see back the most? Tell me all of your boss strike thoughts and theories in the comments below. I would love to read about them, and have a discussion with you in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, just let me know what you liked about it, what you think could be improved, what you disliked about it. Again, any thoughts about Battle Nations, as long as it's respectful towards everybody in the comments below. Anything Battle Nation goes in the comments section below. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. I greatly appreciate you. And yeah, last thing I just want to mention is, of course, stream is either going to be tomorrow or Wednesday. I'll be sure to make a Reddit post about it and probably a community post here on YouTube about it, about the exact time when I get that. I'm very excited to stream Battle Nations with you guys because we're going to be streaming the Battle Nations account. That's right, the official Battle Nations account in Battle Nations while streaming on Battle Nations Twitch TV. There's so much Battle Nations in there. If you like Battle Nations, I think you got to be there because it's going to be a Battle Nations stream. So yeah, guys, that's all I truly have for you. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate every single last one of you. And as always, have a great rest of your day.